I see that some of these podcasts I'm recording sitting outside have sound of the wind gusting. It's not too bad, but since this is a climate course and we are in the monsoon, maybe it's okay to have a little bit of noise from the nature, including the rooster that keeps calling here. Maybe he's not awake yet, although it's already 12:30 p.m. Okay, so we are going to look here at the building industry. This is something we already looked at in terms of sectoral emissions, but here we are in energy use in buildings, but buildings are also part of the story of let's see, steel, cement production, many chemicals, transportation, wastewater, and so on and so forth, deforestation, etc. But more specifically looking at sectoral emissions here, building operations contribute global CO2 of 28%, building materials and constructions, core and shell, contribute about 11%, related industries contribute 32%, and transportation contributes 23%. Okay, 6% is listed as other. In other words, buildings are a massive source of anthropogenic impact on climate change. Building heating and cooling is a major source of energy use as well, right? Under the buildings, there is something to worry about in terms of embodied carbon and operational carbon. So here, embodied carbon are the emissions from manufacturing, transportation, and installation of building materials. Okay, so this is not directly accounted for once building is up and operational. So under operational carbon, we have emissions from a building's energy consumption itself, which is fairly significant in mid-latitudes in terms of heating, and in the tropics in terms of cooling. All right. So the annual global sector building CO2 emissions then can be split into building operations contributing almost 3/4 of it, whereas embodied carbon having 28%. Okay, there's some cooking going on and there is a grinder being run. Hopefully the audio is not being seriously affected. I'll check it and see. Total carbon emissions of global new constructions expected from 2020 to 2050 under business as usual projections. Here are the percentage of carbon emissions. Embodied carbon is expected to increase by 49%, whereas operational carbon is expected to go to 51%. So many of the technologies, efficiencies in transportation, energy, renewable contributions, and so on, will automatically reduce the operational carbon, whereas embodied carbon is still at 49% over this period of total building emissions. Emissions from new construction of buildings, new constructions. Okay, so if you go to places like China and India, for example, there is a massive boom of construction, especially housing, but also commercial buildings. Maybe some of this will change following COVID, where a lot of work from home is affecting workforces, whether they will continue to work more from home and whether we will just go back to our old ways in a few years after COVID has disappeared. Hopefully it will disappear soon. So those kind of considerations have to be taken into account as well. Considerations to be taken into consideration. Okay, so in general, now you know that the certifications like LEED are increasing, and architects are becoming more and more aware of climate change problems and making buildings more and more environmental friendly, climate friendly, energy efficient, water reusable, green buildings, and so on and so forth. So green buildings are those with a small carbon footprint, constructed with techniques and materials that minimize impacts on the natural environment and create healthy indoor environment. So well-being of residents is already part of the story. The greatest energy efficiency gains in buildings in the building sector can be produced using technologies that already exist. We will look at that table later on. Design and construction choices that can mitigate climate change while improving occupant health include low impact indoor appliances and lighting, such as EPA's Energy Star program, tightening the building envelope with improved insulation and modern heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems coupled with proper ventilation and air filtering, and green landscaping and cool roofs, which reduce requirements for energy air conditioning. So the table here in terms of co-benefits of climate change mitigation strategies in buildings: green buildings and reduced toxics in building materials, energy efficiency and daylighting. So if you look around, a lot of buildings use lights inside even during the day because the lighting is not properly taken care of. So the new mitigation strategies would increase daylighting so that electricity use is reduced greatly, especially during the day. The impacts include intermediate and health impacts as before. Green buildings and reduced toxics in the building materials would improve indoor air quality and lead to decreased sick building syndrome. The sick building syndrome is very common, where people working in certain buildings end up with all sorts of headaches, irritations, breathing problems, and so on and so forth. Energy efficiency should lead to reducing pollutant emissions from electricity production and reducing overall energy use in building sectors, and lead to decreased cardiovascular disease, respiratory illnesses, and reduced fuel poverty. Okay. Daylighting increases natural light and views of nature, always supposed to help with productivity and well-being. Improve school and work performance. Okay, so there are other ways to reduce the impacts of buildings on climate, which are included in the drawdown course that I have on my website, which includes things like actually building buildings with wood. So you grow wood specifically for building buildings, and you lock up the carbon that's captured by the trees, and the idea is that they are somehow more susceptible to fires, or that high rises cannot be built with wood, are all now being addressed, because there are many buildings now which are constructed out of wood, and they do keep the carbon locked up for a long time. Okay, and that would also reduce cement production, steel production, which are also highly polluting industries and bad for the environment as well, in terms of resources they use up, and the degradation of land with mining and cement production, quarries, and so on and so forth. Okay, so building sector is important for its impact on climate change, and mitigating its impact on climate change has many health co-benefits. Okay.